Welcome to another edition of Truck News Talk with Jim Park and Stan Campbell.
Over the past couple of months, there have been any number of questions being raised about the feasibility of a Red Seal certification for truck drivers. Now, we know that many truck driver schools are supportive, but I know of a few that question the probability that such a project will ever happen. Many have other questions about how such a high-minded project will solve the problem of the quickie schools. And what are we going to do about governance and enforcement of current laws? One thing that we can agree on is that something needs to be done to raise the bar for graduated truck drivers to make our roads safe again. Qualified drivers. We have a question for the guy who's leading the Red Seal campaign, the chairman of the Professional Truck Training Association of Canada, Don MacDonald. You might say that Jim Park and I are putting him in the hot seat. Jim Park is both a truck driver and journalist and former broadcaster, and I'm an outsider looking in for the past 20 years. I have a vested interest to ensure that my kids and my grandkids, my wife and family, and my friends can feel safe on the highway. Right now, they don't. We expect better of the trucking industry. In a moment, we'll talk to Don after this message from Howe's Products, makers of Diesel Defender, a diesel fuel lubricator and injector cleaner with advanced IDX4 detergent.
Out here, every mile matters, so make every mile count. Diesel fuel is the lifeblood of your engine, and the cleaner it is, the better your truck performs. That's why there's Howe's Diesel Defender. It removes water, boosts lubricity, and cleans your fuel system, helping you burn fuel more efficiently and get more power from every drop. Use it at every fill-up for better performance and cleaner fuel. When you're counting miles, count on Diesel Defender from Howe's. Find Howe's at retailers nationwide. Visit howesproducts.com for more information.
Jim Park is with me, and we have Don MacDonald with us to talk Red Seal. First of all, you are the chairman, is it, of the PTAC, the Professional Truck Training Alliance of Canada?
That is correct. I am the chairman of PTAC, as we like to call it.
You've been traveling all over the country trying to sell the Red Seal deal, as we call it, or as I call it.
Yeah, we've been pretty much from coast to coast. We've been all the way back to into Nova Scotia and points in between. I
think of Nova Scotia as a place where they don't have any minimum training standards. So what's the feeling there?
Well, the East Coast, you have to give them some credit because they do good work back there. They've got a 12-week program, I believe, that they run down there. And, they've got great success. So everybody is intrigued by Red Seal. There is some skepticism, as, kind of to be expected. It's something new. But, moving forward, it is one of the, it's a way to standardize training right across the country.
I thought Melt was supposed to do that.
That's a great question, Jim, and it's also a good statement because you're right. Melt was supposed to do that, but and it probably could have done a little better had there been some proper oversight and compliance checks as it was implemented.
Yep.
Which we all know didn't happen.
It always puzzled me why Melt seemed to water down a lot of driving courses that were already being offered, and we were left with less of a program for less cost, and as you said, no oversight. So how could it be expected to work?
That's a great point as well. And, I think one of the other key takeaways from Melt was that it was put together and it was just handed out and said, here, teach this. But as we move toward a Red Seal designation or to a designated trade, with the Red Seal designation, one of the key takeaways is all of the conversations we're having now to decide how this is going to be put together and how it will work for industry. So, industry involvement, we engage with carriers, the insurance companies are involved, and all levels of government will be involved in this as well, so that it will be tailored and it will fit the industry, not just a canned program that here you go, here it is.
What I was thinking about the TTSAO when it was established, most of the good, respected schools signed up, but many didn't, and a handful signed on, but then ignored the TTSAO standards. How do you expect to deal with that with Red Seal?
Well, just as Red Seal will be controlled, it'll be, it's controlled. It is controlled by the government as well. So places will have no choice but to comply with that. If that's the program that's going to be out there to teach, and if that's, how carriers want to hire, if carriers want to hire Red Seal drivers, well, then that's what they're going to have to do. And a lot of this falls on the carriers as well. And it's going to be carrier involvement, because carriers are going to be involved in getting the people training, getting the seat time, that they're going to need to fulfill the required hours to become certified.
We had that, and going back to melt again, that was one of the requirements, I guess, we use that word lightly, for melt, that the carriers were supposed to finish the training that the melt program provided. It was always seen as entry-level training. But yet I don't see much evidence of carriers, at least a broad swath of carriers, doing that proper finishing training. So even if you went to the carrier with a Red Seal program and said, here's how this is going to work, here's what's going to come out the other end, how are you going to keep them interested and motivated and willing to do that, seat time training and oversight with a new entry-level driver?
Well, that's a great question. And of course, when we go back to the melt idea, it was a recommendation and it wasn't mandatory.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was.
When things aren't mandatory, we all know that they don't get done. So,
right.
If you put the policy in place that you have to accumulate X amount of hours to become certified, well, you have to do those hours to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. In a typical trade arrangement, if you're a carpenter or an electrician, it's a 4-year endeavor, and you have to put in so much time in the classroom, so much time on the job, doing your entry-level skills and working your way up that ladder. And it's all documented so that the training record and the employment record travels with the candidate. Would you be able to put a similar sort of program and tracking mechanism in place for drivers who, probably will move around from carrier to carrier over some period of time?
That is definitely in the works, and Alberta has actually, I should actually step in and say Alberta's leading the way with all of this stuff. With the new learning pathway program, it's a Red Seal style program that they've put together. And there is a learning management system that we use with that. So we track all of the hours that the individual does with an individual school. And then, of course, that will follow through when we get into the next couple of phases of what the Pathways program will be put together with. So we'll be able to track those hours that they will work, or where they're doing the training. And we do have BTAC. We do have an insurance committee that we've put together, and they are very interested in this as well. And they're working together on a platform that will be able to track an individual's work as well,
okay,
where they land. So all of that stuff can be documented.
Question about the Red Seal program as it exists now. I'm thinking about other trades under the Red Seal umbrella. So each province has a slightly different Red Seal, how can I put this, regulations, guidelines, and so on. Isn't that true?
Well, when you're Red Seal, yeah, you can travel. It'll increase your labor mobility for sure. And, I think, as we move forward, trucking is not a Red Seal, as we all know. We're working towards that.
Yes.
And, there hasn't been any new Red Seal trades built in the last decade. So I think this is an opportunity that we're going to have to create a new Red Seal program. And, the way we get there may be a little bit different than we have traditionally gotten through with plumbers, carpenters, and electricians. So I don't know if we're going to fit into a Red Seal designation quite the same way, in the same way of getting there.
Jim and I were just talking about this earlier, then, why Red Seal? How about coming up with our own designation, like, what did you call it, Jim?
Blue ribbon, just as a word that rolled off my tongue.
I hear where you're coming from on that. And again, the first step is getting it designated as a trade. So we've got to land there first before we land to a Red Seal.
Isn't that where the federal government comes in, though? Now, because it's not designated as a skilled trade, shouldn't that be the first move to try to twist some arms to make that happen?
Well, we're working on that as well. And, that's some of the work that's going on behind the scenes that everybody doesn't get to see. But I mean, it's getting to Ottawa. It's getting to the right people to put this in place. I think one thing we can all agree on, guys, is that it is time for a change.
Oh, yeah.
And what we've been doing is not working. And unless we can all get together and make this happen, we can have all the naysaying and we can have all of the arguments as to why it's not going to work. But I think it's time for people to start putting their heads together and saying, okay, how can we make this work?
I just want to clear that up. I think Jim will agree with me on this. I mean, we're all for safer roads and better drivers out there, qualified drivers, but we're asking the questions about how are we going to make this work, or how are you guys going to make this work, and what kind of roadblocks are you going to find along the way? I'm assuming that not every school has signed up. In fact, I looked at the list of schools on PTAC, and there's a number of schools on there that are all very familiar to us. But what about the schools that don't sign up?
Well, I don't think that's going to necessarily mean that it's not going to work because schools don't sign up. If this program gets put into play, or once it gets put into play, hopefully schools are going to want to sign on to it. It's going to be a good program, and I'm sure as most trades, when they start, when we're getting lifted off of them, there'll be funding in place for all this to happen, and the governments will support it. And it'll be worth everybody's while to jump on board.
Of course, the bottom line is enforcement. And this has come up every time we've talked about this. And one of the things that I brought up in the past is, can we really depend or trust the provinces to handle this properly? Or should it go over to the hands of, for example, Transport Canada? They license pilots, they license locomotive engineers, marine, and so on. Should it be under that umbrella? Is that possible?
That's a great question. And typically, driver's licensing is a provincial jurisdiction. It would be interesting to see if the federal government would step into that. Your guess is as good as mine whether or not they will take that on. But in order for this to happen, it's in a red seal at a national level, I think the federal government will have to jump in at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it would be great to see that happen because they do not only enforce and watch over pilot training schools, for example. There are no bad pilot training schools. The licensing of the pilots is done by the federal government at designated licensing places across the country. You just can't get away with being a bad pilot.
No, it's very true, and I would like to see that more on the driver training side as well. I would welcome that. I would welcome more compliance and oversight to make sure that the quality of driver training is trustworthy. That's the key part.
Yeah, I guess it'd be a tough sell to get the federal government, Transport Canada, to take this on.
Don, can you sort of describe for me what a trade is in general terms, and how, I think we understand intuitively what it is, electricians, carpenters, but what actually makes it a quote-unquote trade as opposed to a job or a vocation or something?
Well, Jim, I think the big part of that is it's standardized training. So that when someone comes in to get trained, they're getting the same training no matter what part of the country they're in.
Mm-hmm. You mean the same curriculum or the same basic skills that are taught, or both?
Well, I would think it would be a little of both.
Okay.
When you get into, different terrains, there's going to be the arguments, that if you're in British Columbia, you've got the mountains in British Columbia. Same argument can be made for the prairies.
They're a little hard to find mountains in the prairies, but yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Well, as somebody once told me, there's no mountains in the prairies, but there are an awful lot of deep valleys.
True.
There are other challenges, right? So,
yep.
And I think it's imperative that everybody is trained to be able to deal with those situations, because, as we all know, trucks just don't run around our provinces. They run, they run out of the provinces as well. So you need to make sure that you're set up for success, no matter where you're operating your vehicle.
Would you be, or Red Seal generally, be rewriting a new curriculum or adapting ones that are already around? You've heard this a million times, I'm sure, but we've had well-researched and established curriculums that go back 20 years with earning your wheels, for example. Do we have to reinvent the wheel here, or do we know what constitutes a good curriculum and good, solid training?
Well, I'll sum it up like this. The wheel has been around for a long time. We don't need to make new wheels. We already have the wheels. We just need to make sure that we enforce it. There's a lot of good programs out there. The Earning Wheels program you're talking about was a good program. Ontario put together that program that they ran a few years ago. That was another good program. But it wasn't enforced, and it was voluntary. And, of course, the money dried up. And when the money dried up, the carriers all bailed, and then the program went away.
So, Don, tell me, where are you now? What I'm talking about, I know you've been working in this for quite a long time. So what's next for you and with the Red Seal program?
That's a great question. It's we're full steam ahead. We've got some meetings, that we're going to have across the country again this year to gather some more insight. We're working, we're following pretty closely with the government of Alberta on the Pathways program. They just put together the transportation minister has announced that we're going into phase 4 and phase 5. They're getting ready to put that together, and from what we hear from the minister of Alberta, he's hoping that we can have trucking as a red seal in Alberta by 2028. So it's a couple of years away.
Yeah, it is a big job, isn't it? I mean, you're looking at 2 years ahead yet before you get this in place, even in one province.
It's a huge undertaking. And, fellas, I should say red seal is not a quick fix. It's a long-term solution.
You've talked about enforcement a couple of times, and we all realize, I think, that that's one of the weaknesses of the MELT programs. I can only speak for Ontario on this, but we have two ministries involved, the MTO to some degree, and the colleges and universities who are supposedly doing the enforcement. I think they've just upped their game a little bit. But when you start going across the country, how many agencies or ministries or NGOs are you going to have involved with their fingers in the pie here? And who's actually going to be charged with enforcing that?
I would imagine, I can only speak for Alberta, like Alberta's got their Alberta Transportation, Tech has their division of compliance. And again, kudos to those guys because they're out and about and, they're visiting schools and they're visiting trucking companies. And, as we've all seen, there's been a few schools that have been shut down. And, it just shows that obviously the work is there and they need to get it done.
So there are boots on the ground in Alberta doing enforcement.
100%.
How about some of the other jurisdictions? Have you got any reports back from places like BC or Ontario or Quebec?
We just saw there's some stuff going on in Ontario. There was a few schools shut down out there as well. And, I haven't heard much from British Columbia, but I know there was a couple of schools last year that were investigated. So it's all the noise that we can make now that gets the word out. We're going to have the enforcement officials looking in, and not only that, we're going to have the schools, the good schools, or the somewhat not so good schools. They're going to be saying, "Hey, people are watching us now, so we better clean up our act."
What's the response been, or have you talked to the folks from Quebec? Because as we know, we know that famous line, "Not available in Quebec." What kind of feedback are you getting there?
We don't get much feedback from the folks in Quebec. I think we may have one member from Quebec on PTAC, but we don't hear much from them.
I did talk to some people here, and they practically know nothing about it. So I guess that's an uphill battle. It's a separate battle.
I was just going to say, let's just say it's an uphill battle for that one for sure.
Everything is with Quebec, I'm sorry. What's the response been so far from the insurance industry? I've been critical of them in the past for not taking a more direct involvement in this. I mean, ultimately, it's their dollars on the table when it comes to good and bad drivers, and they continue to insure what I would call dubious drivers. Are there any mechanisms in place, or has the insurance industry said we would buy into Red Seal if the following happened? Where are they in this equation?
Great question, Jim. And the insurance company is very intrigued and they're involved. So, we've got an insurance committee that is involved with PTAC as well, and we meet with those folks regularly, and they are definitely involved in what's going on. And I think they're going to actually help push this forward as well.
What about the various associations across the country, like the OTA and Saskatchewan Trucking Association? I know that you have a member on the board from Saskatchewan Trucking, right?
Yes, we do. We do have involvement from the Alberta Motor Transport Association as well as the Saskatchewan Trucking Association. And we have some correspondences with the folks in Ontario, but they're not members.
Interesting.
If they're listening, I hope they do.
One of the problems, I think you'd probably agree, Don, is funding for driving courses, driving school programs. Oh, yeah. I was looking around last night online, and I saw various provinces have funding opportunities for certain trades, most in fact, seem to be tied with employment insurance, EI, stepping in and, coming up with the wage gap while these people are in school in the classroom and not actually out in the field earning as an apprentice. There are very few funding mechanisms around in Canada for truck driver training that I'm aware of. I know there's some around in various provinces. Some go back to EI. Some are tied to underemployed individuals. Some are tied to unemployed individuals. But it doesn't seem, to me anyway, easy to sort of say, I'm going to take 6 weeks off work, 12 weeks off, whatever the program is, and go and take this proved, validated, good truck driver training program. Would Red Seal open up funding opportunities? Have you had any contact with agencies that do this? And would someone, I jokingly refer to them as a 7-Eleven type, who want to up their career game a little bit but can't afford to take 6 weeks off work and have no earnings while they're shelling out 10 grand or something for a driving course? Would Red Seal help anyway in that regard?
Jim, I'm actually glad you asked me that question because, that's always kind of been a bit of a sticking point when it comes to getting people into the industry. Trucking, these courses are not cheap anymore. There's a lot of time involved and, it takes a lot to put them together. We did have the Canada-Alberta Job Grant. Every province had their own version of that, where people were, carriers could apply for funding for individuals and stuff of that nature. That stuff all dried up. Alberta has a funding model put together for the pathways, learning pathway, for anybody that's seeking employment through a carrier, and the carrier can apply for that grant for the individual. But you're right, there is no general. Technically, trucking for some reason doesn't fall into that. And PTAC actually, that's one of our mandates. That was one of our key objectives, is to make trucking accessible, through funding models. And we're actually, we've been having some meetings, and we're waiting to get in to talk to another couple of people with the government there on the Canada Student Financial Assistance Program. And that should be years ago. You could apply for that as a truck driver, and then for whatever reason they disallowed it, and you couldn't use it for trucking anymore. But we believe it's time to bring that back so people can get funding so they can get in and take the training to further their careers. And I would believe if it becomes a designated trade, just as you can apply for student loans to go to school, if it became a designated trade, then I would venture to say it would have to be funded through student finance.
And that would eliminate the quickie schools, because that's one of the reasons they go to the quickie schools, is because of the cost.
That's for sure. And I mean, that happens in every province, and it happens here as well.
I mean, you have to be realistic, too. And you, as I said in my little diatribe there, taking 6 weeks away from your job or longer leaves your family with no income in many cases. And that's untenable. So I think a new candidate who's looking across the driving school landscape and says, oh, well, this school offers me a course in 2 weeks versus 6 weeks for half the price. It's a pretty attractive option when you're just looking at it from 10,000 feet, not knowing at the other end you're going to come out and still be unemployable. But we can't attract people into the good schools if they're beyond their reach financially. That's a real problem.
You are correct. And as a school, a guy who runs a driving school, I can tell you I have those calls every day where people call and they ask how long and how much and when is my road test. One, they just want to get it done. They're not interested in the training that they get. They just want to have a Class 1 license. So those are the folks that end up at the quickie schools. When you're, go to the quickie school, if the carriers were, obviously these people get to work at the carrier. So the carrier should be able to find out if the person can drive or not, if they're doing, if they have a program in place for that. And then, if these guys go to the quickie schools and they can't drive, well, they shouldn't get in the trucks. But for some reason, they're finding their way in there.
I know, and that's another problem for another day. I'm not sure Red Seal can solve that one, but it's. I wish we could reach the general public in a way. I mean, we're in the trucking industry now, with the exception of Stan. We're preaching to the converted here a lot. When we talk about the virtues of Red Seal and better driver training, we all intuitively know that. But to somebody who's interested in becoming a truck driver, they're not steeped in industry lore and tradition. They don't really know how the industry works. They just want an in. And frankly, someone tells them, you can take this course or that course. It's twice the price and twice the length. And you'll still get your license with the other course. That's all they're looking for, because nobody's explained to them the problem with trying to go forward in the job market with the wrong driving school on your diploma. I think we got to get a marketing program in place where we're reaching not the trucking industry, because we're not the market. It's folks on the outside who are trying to get in.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a great point.
That's been one of my premises because I come from the outside. I'm the guy that's looking from the outside, looking in at the trucking industry. The regular folks out there don't get it. They don't know what's going on. And I think we need like Jim says, almost like an advertising campaign or a marketing campaign saying, this is what trucking's about. This is what you have to do to get your license. And you're not going to get employed if you go to one of those other quickie schools. We're not getting the message out there. So who has the funds and the creative sense to do this kind of thing? I think it's organizations such as the CTA and all the associations. They represent the industry, the big carriers. Shouldn't they be the ones that are investing in marketing the trucking industry and a trucking career as a viable career that earns great respect?
Stan, I couldn't agree with you more. Unfortunately, for the trucking industry, we're wearing a couple of black eyes right now. The trucking industry, the trucking industry has definitely earned some bad press over the last few years, and you guys are helping my cause here right now, because making this a designated trade with a red seal is going to clean the industry up. And then when the younger generation, they want to go to school and get a trade, well, trucking will be available for that. And then that's going to help attract people into the industry.
I sure hope you're right.
We blew it after COVID because trucking and truckers earned such a beautiful reputation during COVID. And then somehow an event like what happened in Florida, for example, just destroyed that image.
For sure, and you know, that is definitely a conversation for another day, because we can get real deep in the woods in that one.
Yes.
Yes. But again, it's getting the industry back on track. We all know we talk about a driver shortage. I don't necessarily believe in the fact that there is a driver shortage. I would sum it up by saying there is a shortage of qualified drivers, and that's what we need to address.
Well, Don, I congratulate you on your efforts, and I know you've been working hard in this for a long time, and we want to stay in touch with you over the next several months, or the next, well, you say 2028 is kind of the target date for Alberta, all the way through till it's actually happening. We'll like to stay in touch with you and keep up to date. We may not sound like we're in your corner, but we are.
It's okay. It's the hot seat. I expected this, so it's. I've got some grill marks. I'll be okay.
Okay.
I'm just trying to ask the questions that other people who were thinking about this would be asking.
We're all for better drivers, qualified drivers on the road. We want that to happen. And in the interest of my kids and my family and my grandkids who are out there driving on the highways, their safety is important too. Don, thank you so much for joining us and agreeing to come back with us again. And I'm sure we'll hear from some other folks after this.
Looking forward to it, Stan. We'll talk soon.
Take care, Don.
Thanks, Jim. You guys have a great day.
That's Don MacDonald, chairman of the Professional Truck Training Association of Canada. Like I said in our conversation with Don MacDonald, we're not naysayers. We're asking the questions that others have posed, and we need to keep asking questions. If this is going to work, we need to have all the answers. After so many past plans that died, we got to make this work. One more thing that we touched on. The driving public has to be better informed about the seriousness of trucking and how the vast majority of drivers are laser focused on safety. They also need to know that the trucking industry takes training seriously. I've said this over and over ad nauseum for the past 19 years. I guess it falls on deaf ears, but I think the trucking industry does a shitty job of promoting and marketing to the driving public. The public knows nothing about the trucking industry other than the fact that they're big trucks and they have 18 wheels or more. The trucking industry does a great job of talking to each other. In a moment, I'll tell you what's next on the TNT podcast with Jim Park and myself. Right after this message from Howe's Products, makers of Diesel Defender, a diesel fuel lubricator and injector cleaner with advanced IDX4 detergent.
Out here, every mile matters, so make every mile count. Diesel fuel is the lifeblood of your engine, and the cleaner it is, the better your truck performs. That's why there's Howe's Diesel Defender. It removes water, boosts lubricity, and cleans your fuel system, helping you burn fuel more efficiently and get more power from every drop. Use it at every fill-up for better performance and cleaner fuel. When you're counting miles, count on Diesel Defender from Howe's. Find Howe's at retailers nationwide. Visit howesproducts.com for more information.
Coming up on the next Truck News Talk episode, the tax man. Why is Revenue Canada suddenly interested in owner-operators, especially at a time when we're asking them to take a hard look at Driver Inc.? What's going on? Jim Park will go solo as he talks to a tax pro. That's coming up in the next TNT episode. In the meantime, have a safe and rewarding week.